everybody. This is Jen Kleinhens.
And I'm Rob Vose.
And you are listening to another episode of Everybody Hates Your Brand, a podcast where we talk about our thoughts and opinions on marketing, from customer experience to brand and everything in between. Join us today as we talk to our special and very first podcast guest, Mark Razzell, about the mysterious world of data and marketing.
So yeah, today is a momentous occasion. It's a first for this podcast, for the Everybody Hates Your Brand podcast. We have our first ever guest. And before I say who it is, let me explain where this kind of idea came from. Last week in episode 10, we had a bit of a rant episode between the two of us. And one of the sort of things that really gets my goat is when companies and brands do experimentation or don't, and if they do experimentation, they do them poorly, they use insights poorly, they create insights poorly. And in that, I quoted an ex-colleague, an expert on the subject matter. That person is a guy called Mark Razzell, and he is currently Director of Data and Insights at Clemenger BBDO in Melbourne. So it is roughly 8:15 at night for him at the time we record this. So, Mark, welcome to the podcast.
Hello.
Would you like to give a bit of a sort of history of yourself? Why should people care what you think, Mark?
Yeah, sure. How long you got? No, I'll start my current role at Clemenger. Is a fun one. I think Clemenger has a big old neon sign on the front of the door. When you walk in, you can't miss it, and it says creativity is always the answer. And inherent, latently implied by that is if there's an answer, there has to be a problem, a question, or an opportunity. My role is about helping to identify that. So I am very much focused. I guess you call me a data scientist to some extent, but I'm much more focused on research than I am on engineering. So anything that involves data, and that's not just numbers, that includes shitloads of words. We use that to tell us what is the best way to approach a problem, answer a question, or exploit an opportunity. It's a bit of a mix of like business intelligence, market intelligence, consumer intelligence. It's fun. It's a lot of fun.
That's good. I'm good.
Yeah.
So, and you've got a pretty strong academic background in the sciences, from what I remember.
I'll let you think they're strong, mate. That's fine.
To me.
No. It's my academic background is in evolutionary biology and animal behavior. So I do have still a very, very strong affinity and interest in the natural world and trying to understand it. So subsequently, from the age of 16 through to 22 to postgrad, I was just studying animals in the natural world in quantitative behavioral stuff. And yeah,
I mean, look, it sounds official, if nothing else.
It's very impressive.
And to be honest with you, Jen and I, to be fair though, I am the least qualified here by some distance.
Oh no!
I have a standard bachelor's degree. Jen has an MBA and a master's. You've got masters coming out your ears. I'll leave. I can just
show yourself.
I can just clear off.
Rob, mate, you got a personality. You're good. You're good.
I'm touched. I mean, I do have an Institute of Direct Marketing Advanced Diploma. Let's not sniff at that. The reason, obviously, we kind of spoke to you, Mark. We all worked together back in the day at DDB in Sydney, which feels like eons ago now. It's coming up to 3 years since I left Australia, which I can't.
Gee whiz, really?
Wrap my head around. Yeah. It'll be 3 years at the end of September. Actually, it's over 3 years now.
Oh, wait.
Actually, it is over 3 years. Yeah, it's over 3 years now. So this year, I don't like the months have no meaning anymore. So I'm not sure where I am. So, but what we want to say, we talked about a little bit about experimental design. I wrote an article about it on Medium, and you helped me out with some stuff there in terms of explaining things like statistical significance and control groups and all that kind of stuff. And whether we go into that level of detail or not today, I'm not sure. But what I wanted to do was kind of break down the discussion into kind of sort of three chunks. They do merge together, as I'm sure you know, Mark, from when I sent you this as pre-reading. But I think one of the things we wanted to talk about, one was in terms of experimental design.
Mm-hmm.
One was in terms of sort of interpreting the output of either an experiment or any insight research work, analytics that you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third one was about working with analysts, data scientists, and how you can get the best out of them. So if we kind of just kind of mosey through those. So one of the things that used to drive me, still does drive me nuts, is when people say, "Oh, we'll test that," and then they set up an experiment that's not going to teach them anything at all,
and then interpret the results in their favor.
Yeah. So, from your experience and working both agency side and client side, what do you think are the biggest issues that you see in relation to experimental design?
Look, without getting into the nitty gritty, well, I probably will once you fire me up. But I think, broadly speaking, I think it's all caused by a bit of a lack of scientific training. I think if you knock that one over, everything else will take care of itself. The things you mentioned there, like you do sort of a half-assed test. If you get a half-ass it, just don't bother because you'll get terrible results and mislead yourself. But yeah, just broadly speaking, like a lack of understanding about what science is and how science works. I tend to sort of say that in our industry, science is viewed as a tool to be abused rather as a driving philosophy that we use to understand the world around us.
So do you think there's an element there of, sorry to interrupt you, but do you think there's an element there of I've created a story, I need a fact to fit it, rather than...
Oh, 100%. Yeah, 100%.
Absolutely,
and that's that comes down to, like, I'll probably say this quite a few times, but science, the fundamental of science is about proving yourself wrong rather than proving yourself right. The great philosophers of old recognized that if you set out to prove yourself right, you're going to do it. It's going to happen. And that's why the entirety of the methods that we use and even the way that we interpret statistical results are all built around checking if you're wrong. Indeed, the way you design experiments should be about trying to prove yourself wrong. That's why we have null hypotheses, etc. And I think just stuff like not understanding or not allowing for confounding variables, in the way that they set up these, because they're so keen to prove themselves right. They just overlook all the details. Basically, if you if you have a bit of an appreciation for science, how it works, what it is, and why it should be revered and respected and adhered to, everything else takes care of itself.
And that kind of reverence or lack thereof, is that a function, do you think, that you said that obviously modicum of training would help that out? Do you think it doesn't exist because people can't be asked, or they just don't see it as important, or what because you say training can help a lot of things, but there's got to be a sort of root cause that people don't want to get involved in that for some reason.
I just think they're interested in other stuff, mate. And that's fair enough. Like, I mean, the only reason why I know about it and appreciate it, like it, and love it is because I just wanted to understand animals. That was all I wanted to know. And then I went to university and all that jazz to try and learn about that. And just, if you want to understand something that's difficult to understand, you have to understand science. And a lot of the people that we work with in our industry, that's not the pathway that they took through education.
No,
it's interesting actually. We talk a lot about Dunning-Kruger on the side of it, of Dunning-Kruger being that you overestimate your knowledge on a subject if you know a little bit. Like, a little knowledge is a dangerous thing, but it also works on the other end of it, right? If you know a lot about something, you tend to overestimate everybody else's knowledge and understanding of a particular subject. And I'm constantly checking myself on that. Just because it would be arrogant of me to assume that everybody should be on my level of understanding of science. Even I'm not great at it. So I don't want to say it's arrogant. I think it's just, I think. They're just.
I think a lot of people get into creative services and the creative. If you want to, it's sort of the commercial creative realm in that sense. You're absolutely right. They're not looking to understand. They're not looking to understand experimental design, control groups, and all the stats like p-values and all the things that come along with that.
Cool.
But I do think there is an issue though, that if you don't at least have a modicum of understanding of that, as we've just briefly talked about, you are throwing money away. So if you want to test something new or try something new, I always have this phrase: "Never assume new is better," which is kind of the what you've just been talking about to a degree, a paraphrase of that. And I see it all the time. Do you see it when you're working with clients? And I'm obviously not asking you to talk about any specific clients here, but when you work with clients and you're working with agency people, is there any difference between the two in terms of an understanding of it, or is it kind of universal, sort of a universal issue in some way? Do you see any variance in the two?
I tend to find clients broadly a little better, just because I feel like they're more typically exposed to some sort of base level experimental design as part of their either professional or academic education. And also they're more likely to have interacted in detail with like market research agencies, etc. And so they've kind of been forced to training. And like going back to the last one where I sort of said, it's about training and it's not their fault, that they've been forced to engage. Whereas in agencies, a lot of the time you're not forced to. You should. Like as soon as we start throwing around words like hypothesis and statistical significance, you're in the realm of science and you should probably learn about it. But broadly speaking, that said, when I have come across people who are really into it and are really well versed, and people who like always take me by surprise, like there's a couple of creatives in our team in particular that I'm thinking of here, and Clem's is actually a standout of the creative teams having reverence and respect for experiments and research. So when you come across someone in agency who knows their stuff and appreciate, they'll knock you back. The broad application client side, but the standouts agency.
Yeah, I also think it's a function of a lot of clients, especially of a scale, have big insight teams. Have analysts on deck, have people that you can work with and talk to. They're
more used to interacting with those dudes day to day compared to a junior copywriter.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember when back in the day when you and I did our triumphant I'm such a data geek presentation at DDB. I remember a lot of people, I had a couple of people come up to me afterwards and say, wow, we hadn't thought about that, or we didn't know that, or wow, you guys are losers. No, we got some really positive feedback from that, from what I recall. So
I think if you were packaged it about 10 or 15 times, mate.
Yeah, I mean, it was a good. Me too, mate. Flog a dead horse. No. So the question, if you were to kind of give, I'm not asking you to create a training course, but if you were to kind of say, what are the things that or the biggest issues, or the biggest things you would want people to take into consideration when creating an experiment or creating a test, as in as few words as you can, what would be those kind of key elements?
I think it's just one. You just got to spend more time on the question.
Okay.
What's the question you
what
want?
What are you actually trying to? Yeah.
The reason why, and I don't mean the questions in your survey. I mean, what's the actual question you want to answer? Because if you get that right, everything else starts to fall out. So, as an example, I think a lot of people will stop shy. So, like a question may being, I'll use an example I've sort of been battling with at the moment, actually. The original question was, what's the optimal value proposition? And that's kind of where everybody will scurry off and try and figure that out. That's what I would call a broad research question, which actually needs a bit of interrogation in and of itself. So we break that down and think about that. So what's the optimal value proposition? Okay, so saying optimal, it means that there has to be a comparison inherent within. And I assume, because we're talking about value proposition, we're talking down the funnel. So we're talking conversion. Therefore, I assume we are talking about packages versus discount, because that's how one rationally drives the value proposition. And people may say, no, actually, we're talking about how do we get brand to drive the value proposition. Now that reshapes that question entirely. And if you don't interrogate that, you don't know that. But in this particular instance, that's what we were talking about. Then again, when you start to interrogate that research question, you might get an injection of, we're talking about optimal with different types of people. So what's the optimal value proposition for different types of people? that inherently carries implications for how you design your experiments to learn to answer the question. And then you start to, once you know that, then you start to be able to think, okay, so I know that if I'm designing an experiment, we're saying different kinds of people. I need a large enough sample to allow for statistically valid tests across different age groups, across male, female, different demographics, hell, maybe even attitudes. If we're the kind of brand that sells products based on how people think and feel as opposed to where they are socioeconomically, etc. And I'll stop there because I could keep going. Questions?
I think you've made it.
Beget questions.
Yeah, I think you made a really good point about the questions. There's that great quote. I think we actually used it in our presentation. Was it W. Edwards Deming? If you do not know how to ask the right question, you discover nothing. Yeah. Which is a wonderfully trite sentence, but is absolutely.
Everything falls out of that. If you spend enough time obsessing over the question, the broad research question, and then subsequently all your analytical questions, everything's easy after that because you know what data you need to answer the question. You'll even know what sort of analysis you're going to be running once you're defining those things. So it's very easy in our busy busy lives where there's a lack of reverence for detail to just kind of go, that's the question. Okay, somebody go answer it. And then some poor account executive will spend 3 weeks doing desk research on a poorly defined question. Probably not doing that.
Yeah, it's sorry. That strikes me as like a really, really smart approach to data because I feel like so many agencies specifically and clients as well, they feel like data is better at down the funnel. Do you know what I mean? Like data helps predict, data helps us get smarter. But in actual fact, I think you make a really smart point, which is if we can define the question with, understanding like how we want to go out, what we want to do. Yeah. And I'll be honest, I feel like in my experience, it's so weighted in the other direction that you spend all of this time running around finding an answer to a question you didn't really spend that much time thinking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And worse, they've set it up in a way that they can't answer the original question that they wanted to answer. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like when you actually find out, oh no, we want to find that out. Well, then why did you set it up like that? We would have done it differently.
I mean, it's academia 101. You read, you find a subject area you're interested in, you read everything that we know about that, and you find a new question, and then you answer that question in an incredibly verbose and detailed way. In a 10,000 word manuscript, so that you can confidently say that, well, in my particular case, that yes, the amount of seminal fluid produced by a male beetle does influence the fecundity of the female. The female beetle,
I'm just glad we have an explicit warning.
That's we got to earn that NSFW, man.
You know what I mean? Yeah, absolutely.
But it's
getting saucy. That's all I'm saying.
I will always bring it back to beetle seminal fluid. Always, mate. Always.
Delightful. I remember. I read my. I read my sister's PhD once. So she has a PhD in a very obscure. She'll kill me for saying that. An area of geology. And I read the first page, which was all like the acknowledgements and stuff. And I tried reading the second page, and I read it. It was like this word had 97 syllables, and I thought, just leave it. Like this is not a rip snorting page turner. You're not meant to read this. It was like crazy stuff. Anyway, so let's say you have created an experiment. Let's say you've done the work and you've come up with the questions, and you're looking at some results, and you're trying to figure out what those results mean and interpret the output of that. What are some of the things that you see that people get wrong when interpreting sort of outputs and analysis? I mean, this could go on for a while, but just give me a few.
Well, I think the most common is gerrymandering. A phrase you're probably familiar with, Jen, I'd imagine.
Well, yes.
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately, and that's like related back to one of the grandfather's statistics. I forget his name because I'm not a fanboy, but he said, if you torture data long enough, it will confess to anything. And what I mean by gerrymandering is not what I mean, but what it means quite literally is sort of putting ring fences around groups of data to promote an answer that you want. So like, as an example, let's say in our experiment, we decided that we wanted to understand somewhat arbitrarily groups of ages. So 25 to 30, 31 to 35. We just decided that that's how we're going to view the world. And when we were breaking things down, we saw that we didn't see an exciting result in differences between 25 to 30-year-olds compared to 31 to 35-year-olds. And we wanted to see something exciting there. But actually, when we expand it from 25 to 32-year-olds and then 33 to the difference becomes a little more exciting and more dramatic on a PowerPoint slide. So we'll just kind of casually expand the age range and compare sample groups to, so that we get a more dramatic statistic that allows us to make a big, bold point. See that a lot. And, I find that, I mean, it's funny, to be honest with you. Like, I've been
it's that people were talking about earlier. Is you've have a predetermined story, and you're trying to find something to.
Exactly right. Yeah, exactly. And I think it's so funny. Like you've decided what you want the answer to be, which is the antithesis of science, and we hate that shit. But it's science as an approach is not immune to that either. You see something similar in academia called p-hacking, like where the result won't be published. So if you didn't find something that's interesting, if your hypothesis wasn't correct, people won't publish the results. And something similar happens in our industry where you've got this experiment, you think you've got an amazing question, and you're really hoping that the hypothesis you have is correct, and you're going to find out that actually your key target audience is actually 85-year-old blue rinse grannies, whereas everyone else is targeting 25-year-old neoliberal hipsters. And then you find out you're incorrect. And there's always a temptation to kind of force that through. And that's how that happens with gerrymandering.
And we talked about this, and I've seen it happen a few times where someone's running an experiment and it wasn't a significant result in any way, and they're like, well, we'll just keep doing it anyway, or whatever. And usually that's because of like the sunk cost fallacy. Someone's put so much time and effort and work into something that they psychologically can't kill it because it means too much to them. And I think there's an element of, it's probably the wrong word, but an element of ruthlessness that kind of almost needs to come along with this, which is if you're going to live by science, you have to kind of die by it as well, which is if it's not working, suck it up. At least it's not working. You've removed one possibility.
Yeah. A lack of answer isn't an answer. Is an answer in itself.
Absolutely. I remember some of the other stuff we talked about. Things like what everyone's favorite. Correlation does not equal causation. I think there's a graph in one of our. I'll try and dig it out.
Yeah, no, you're right.
It's Nick Cage movies versus deaths or something like that.
Yeah, deaths in swimming pools. Correct. But I think even that one, I've got a bit of a bone to pick about, because like correlation versus causation. Correlation doesn't necessarily imply causation, but any decent scientist knows it's a pretty good place to start looking for causation.
Yeah, you can't have causation without correlation.
Yeah, exactly. But then you'll find, I find that great evidence of Dunning-Kruger in our industry actually is that people will just sort of shout it out, as in like, I know something, and then it's it's like cool. But let's not forget it. Not necessarily imply it's a good place for us to start.
But I think the nuance in the language there is important, isn't it? So as long as you're not saying this causes this, but you're saying, look, there's a correlation here, we should investigate that further.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Rather than saying there is directly a causal link. I think there's a few things like that stand out. I think there's some of the things I see, like people who do pre and post kind of comparisons, but there's so much noise in the signal already that you can't possibly know. Like I remember I've seen it on sales of particular products, and they go bounce up and down beforehand, and they look afterwards, and it's bounced up and down afterwards. And so how are you supposed to see anything? And the one point I think you made about what's your reference point? I remember there was read an article. Ipsos Mori did some work on millennials and had this idea that they are completely different is a myth. And one of the issues is the way the data is represented in news, which is 48% of millennials think this. Well, there's no reference point for either A, what other age groups think of that, which might be pretty similar in some circumstances, or B, they haven't referenced what older people thought when they were younger.
Yeah.
So do you know what I mean? There's no people aren't putting solid reference points down around what that data actually says. It's just, as you said, it's just like a headline. That sounds dramatic. Let's put that in.
Yeah.
Okay. So we talked about a lot of different things. One of the things I want to talk about now was working with data scientists, analysts, that kind of stuff. And if you are somebody with not much training in statistics or whatever it is, scientific method, what do you see as the kind of main issues or the main things that people need to be aware of when they're talking to people who are experts in this field?
I think the major difference is they care about the detail and they need to talk it through.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Like going back to that, the what's the question thing. I know I drive my colleagues nuts because they're all busy people and they'll come
I
up to
know.
me. And
You used to be a colleague.
they'll come up and they'll be like, mate, what's the I need your help with this. What's da da da? And they're in a panic. I'm like, okay, well, what's the question? Let's just try and. Can you just go and do the work? And unfortunately, by the nature of the game, we've got to have a bit of a detailed brief. It's very similar. Like I drew this conclusion the other day. Like for me, the question is the creative brief. I ask and expect that you spend as much time deliberating over that and obsessing over that as you would over a proposition.
I think that's a fair shout. Absolutely.
Yeah, so I think that's for me that's a pretty big one. Is just appreciating the tools of their trade, or at least the starting point being the question and obsessing over those details.
Gotcha.
And like pretty much all of them are nerds. It's treat them kindly, treat them gently.
Yeah. And would you say that in terms of going back the other way, so a data scientist or an analyst working with other people, I've had occasions where I've worked with extraordinarily smart people.
Thank you, mate. It's nice of you to say that.
I was about to say present company, but I'm not gonna. There's no academic sort of comparison going on here, as we know. But they created a statistically correct answer, but that was commercial suicide. Like things that just wouldn't stack up or wouldn't get signed off or those kind of things. Is there anything you see the other way where there's something like a data scientist or analyst could do to what's the word? Almost make themselves more accessible? I'm not sure that's the right word, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean that's 90% of my career, mate. I think is bridging that gap between between the data scientists and commercially minded people. And I think I worked with this dude in the bank, one of the data scientists there. He's a really, really nice guy, very interesting, intensely intelligent. And he was in a similar boat. He was more in the engineering side of things, and we were talking about like how do you bridge the gap? And he said, I would rather the marketing team, before I go away and build any models or try and let the statistics guide us as to what's going to sell more credit cards, I would rather the marketing team tell me what they think that is first, and then I'll go and engineer the features and figure that out in deployment. And I think when tying it back to experimental design, arrogance goes two ways. There's a lot of arrogance amongst data scientists and analysts as well with regards to dismissing people who aren't in the field. And I think you got to stay a little bit humble and appreciate that they know what they're talking about in their realm and their field. And in the same way that I'm asking for respect, to give me time to think about the details and the question, I've got to work with them as well. And understand that they are busy. And while I like to focus on one thing at a time, they don't have that luxury. They've got to focus on 30,000 different things.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, look, that's been a pretty good half an hour. I think the one thing I just wanted to bring out, I remember when we worked together and we've used this quote a lot. So we used to have a quote board behind us at DDB. It was behind your head, if I remember rightly, Mark.
Yeah.
And
I've had a quote wall in every single place I've ever worked in.
I'm not surprised, but the one that always stands out to me was my anecdote. My personal anecdote overrides your data, which is one of the things we didn't talk about earlier. But I think I just wanted to bring some sort of relevance to that. to anybody out there who's looking at data and working with data scientists, leave your personal anecdotes to yourself in general, I would suggest. Would you agree with that, Mark? I think there's an element here of, well, my son did this, and
one
yes,
time I went in and I saw this happen.
Your son is a sample size of 1 against 100,000 people that we've.
Yeah. I think I credit most people with enough intelligence to, in our industry to know that. But it's the checking yourself. Making an anecdote is an area for exploration, not an explicit statement of fact.
Exactly. Well, look, Mark, thank you for spending the time with us today. Much appreciated. If you have anything to shill or any links you want to throw in, we're not averse to some blatant commerciality on this.
Rather than do that, and probably much to the annoyance of my employers, can I just whinge about one thing in particular?
Yeah, knock yourself out, man.
Statistical.
It wouldn't be you if it wasn't a win. So I'd feel cheated if there wasn't at least one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, statistical significance is the one thing I don't think we've talked about that I think people need to know about.
Gotcha.
I was in a meeting a little while ago where a bloke said, he said, I don't understand why people say directionally significant. He said, either something is statistically significant or it isn't. And everybody kind of nodded sagely and chuckled and agreed. And I looked around and I was like, well, I don't want to say anything in this room, but that's total bullshit.
Would you like to define what you mean by each of those things? So explain why that annoys you so much.
Quick, I think the statistics, going back to the Dunning-Kruger, I know a little bit of science, and therefore
I feel like I'm being personally attacked here for the record.
Yeah. Sorry, it's so statistical significance, broadly speaking, and I apologise to any statisticians listening here who are thinking I'm doing this a horrible disservice, because I am. But broadly speaking, statistical significance is the chance that your hypothesis is wrong within certain statistical tests, or rather common statistical tests that we apply. It's your p-value basically, and it's the standard accepted in science. The acceptable threshold that you are wrong for you to accept your hypothesis is 5%. So we say, if there's less than a 5% chance you are wrong statistically, then you can accept your null hypothesis.
Which is why you hear 95% confidence levels thrown around all the time.
It's the same thing. They're kind of inverse.
It's just the reverse of that. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. But you don't look at them. You don't look at them in isolation. You never do. And there are certain scenarios, particularly within our world, where you don't always have perfectly designed experiments, and you have to give yourself a little bit of wiggle room where sometimes a p-value of 10% might be okay. There are areas of grey within statistics, and I think that would be the if you've ever heard someone say that's statistically significant and therefore we're going to get on our knees and bow to the god of research, and if that's ever frustrated you, then come and talk to me.
Yeah, and we could then start rambling on into things like statistical power and all those kind of things, which we won't, because we'll be...
What was it you used to say? It's it's statistically significant because it had an uplift of 50% of fuck all.
Yeah. Right, well, thank you for that. On that bombshell, on that statistical bombshell. Well, look, man, thank you very much for spending the time out of your evening to talk to us today, and to everybody else.
Pleasure to talk to you both.
It's it's been a genuine pleasure. So we'll speak soon.
So that's it for this episode of Everybody Hates Your Brand. We hope you enjoyed it. You can find show notes, resources, and more episodes on our website, everybodyhatesyourbrand.com. But before we go, let's leave on a positive note and share what we're loving right now. So, Rob, what you got this week?
Well, this week has been an interesting, I don't want to say controversy, I suppose it is. I read an article in Campaign about, which is a great microcosm of today's marketing debate. So, it was started by Byron Sharp did an interview with Campaign to celebrate 10 years since How Brands Grow has come out, which is extraordinary. And for those of you who don't know, Byron Sharp is Professor of Marketing Science and Director at the University of South Australia's Ehrenberg Bass Institute for Marketing Science. So in theory, he knows his stuff. And he's kind of carried on with the same trends from that book. So he said marketers are too easily distracted by day-to-day and they miss big trends. And he kind of talked about his thesis as kind of like Isaac Newton's laws of gravity, saying they are scientific principles that don't change. And then along comes this guy called David Jones, who said that he's living in the last century. Now, who is David Jones, you might ask?
Good question.
Jones runs You and Mr. Jones, the fast-growing, and I'm just bear in mind the words I'm about to say, fast-growing marketing technology group that owns companies including Blood, Gravity Road, and Oliver.
I'm sure he's a nice guy, but why has he named his own agency You and Mr.
True.
Jones?
Jones was also founding member of Facebook's client council.
Oh, I see. So he's all in on digital, basically.
Now, unsurprisingly, he vehemently disagrees with Sharp's take on the digital landscape.
I'm shocked.
So he takes issue with a couple of things. Sharp suggested that the internet was a mature medium in 2010 and that nothing has fundamentally changed. He said that that's just not fundamentally true.
Not true.
In 2009, Facebook revenue was $750 million and none of that was in mobile. Last year in 2019, Facebook's revenue was $70 billion, of which 94% was in mobile.
Right.
He next responded to Sharp's wanting to check the real numbers when it comes to the exponential growth in commerce. He's saying that it's not as dramatic, and he's obviously counterpointing against that. Obviously, COVID's had a huge impact on that. So there's a whole bunch of stuff he kind of says. He said, "I'm pretty sure Byron knows all of this and is deliberately playing to his base. Scared traditional clients who want to hear that it's still all about TV and mass marketing and that they don't need digital transformation. They do. And COVID-19 has further accelerated digital transformation. His comments look like they belong in another century."
Burn.
And then Sharp comes back and says, he points out, he said he doesn't focus on traditional media. Facebook and Google are sponsors of the Aaron Bergbass Institute. His whole campaign, How Brands Grow, is about fundamental laws. It doesn't discuss media tactics. The book was immediately popular amongst digital agents who had credit with considerable imagination, realising how the principles apply to their work. And didn't I say something in the article? Beware of charlatans who claim that everything has changed. This guy appears to make his money from selling such stuff.
I have a conspiracy theory. This is like
course
East
you
Coast,
do.
West Coast rap. I think that they got together and they designed manufactured
It's a publicity
feud.
stunt.
Yes. Yes.
I like it.
Conspiracy theory.
But it's I think it's a fascinating...
Can't they both be right?
No, because I think they're both
parts of them-
taking... There's a middle road, but I think they can't both be right because they're taking such
they can't-
divergent opinions.
No, but I'm saying, like, can't they both
There's
have
somewhere in the
elements
middle.
of the correct
And
argument?
I am more
I don't
than-
totally agree with either one of them.
I am more inclined with the more scientific of the two, who's actually run tests and done empirical studies.
Yeah, but is it scientific or is it academic? I feel like there's a
Well, yeah, but
reasonable difference between
I
the
would
two.
argue there's a bit more potentially small. No, I've never met David Jones, I don't know, but clearly he has a dog in this fight in terms of what he's selling.
That's true.
And it would also suggest that, Byron Sharp's work is seminal, but if you look at, digital expenditure and all those kind of things, digital expenditure has gone through the roof still. So clearly it's not having a huge, Byron Sharp's having an impact, but it's not, there is still a trend pushing towards digital. Mm-hmm. I just thought it was a really interesting read of the two sides of this coin.
We do love a good feud on this podcast.
We do love a good feud. So that was mine. What have you got this week?
Well, mine was very happy. If you have seen, so there is a famous sort of viral TikTok or a thing that's gone viral of this guy. I'm going to give you his, he's got 1.5 million followers now, so I don't think you necessarily need to go find Dogface208 on TikTok.
Right.
And he basically did a TikTok of himself on a skateboard drinking ocean spray cranberry juice to Fleetwood Mac's amazing hit Dreams.
Oh gosh.
To which Fleetwood Mac, not Fleetwood, Mick Fleetwood, thank you.
Yeah.
One half of Fleetwood Mac. Sorry, I've completely fucked up I know who Fleetwood Mac are.
Yeah.
He's not one half.
I
He's
think
one
she doth
quarter
protest too much.
Now I just feel like no one knows.
It's a drummer
I
from
understand.
Fleetwood Mac.
Yes.
Let's just go with that.
Yes, I know exactly who he is. I've seen the behind the music. It's very dramatic. Anyway, so he got on a skateboard and drank a bunch of ocean spray and apparently solely joined TikTok just to do this. And then Ocean Spray found out that this guy, I don't really know his background. I get the idea that he's kind of like maybe struggling slightly, because he was into the vibe with the Fleetwood Mac song and drinking the Ocean Spray stuff on what appeared to be an interstate highway on a skateboard.
Okay.
He just was living his best life. And I think we all need more of that, given what's going on in the world today. Let's all just see more people with positive, wholesome
sacrificing
TikToks.
themselves on a freeway.
No, like just living their best life. Like it's a vibe. Like I'm into it. It's cool. But Ocean Spray found out that like this guy's car battery died, so they gave him a new car. And then the CEO of Ocean Spray, I think like partially, sort of cringily. I mean, the heart was in the right place, I think, but he got on a skateboard and drank a bunch of ocean spray. In his ocean spray, like, Patagonia-looking tight vest. So it was a little, like,
that's gone a bit
fellow
corporate at that
kids.
point,
I think they pushed it slightly too far.
It's a bit your dad dancing at a wedding. Sorry, Dad.
Yeah.
Doing that. Come on, son.
Little bit.
I've still got it.
A little bit. To be honest with you, I think they could have just left it, like, giving him a car, giving him, like, a new longboard or something, and, like, could have just left it at that. But the CEO, clearly uncomfortable. I was afraid he was going to fall on his face the entire time. But, you know, good faith effort. Good job. I mean, we need more wholesomeness. I think Ocean Spray did the right thing. They saw an opportunity that was organic, and they stepped into it, and they actually helped someone. I mean, obviously, they did turn it into what has 15,000 comments on it at the moment.
Right.
350,000 likes on Instagram.
A nice little tactic.
And yeah, I mean, I think it's, like I said, I think a lot of brands are kind of struggling at the moment because anything kind of feels like the wrong thing, especially in the U.S. where you've also got a lot of election drama and president coronavirus drama. And, like, so much stuff happening. Like, let's just focus our energy on, like, good, wholesome stuff. So I enjoyed it. Well, you did it. You've wasted another perfectly good half an hour or so with Rob and Jen and the Everybody Hates Your Brand podcast.
Don't forget Mark.
And Mark, that's right. Again, you can find us on everybodyhatesyourbrand.com. Please join our email list. We'll send you a notification every time there's a new episode of the podcast. And your podcast platform of choice. Have a week.
Take great care and be vigilant.